engineering manager at Atlassian. I work on Trello. Most people recognize Trello more than Atlassian, so I like to put that name in there. Want to thank the panel very much because a lot of the stuff they touched on I can build off of, especially talking about disengaged remote workers and such. I want to talk about remote performance management, which is a very difficult subject, whether you're remote or not. Because I could ask everybody in here, what is your definition of acceptable performance? And I would get a different answer from every single person. And given 1 minute to answer, not a single one of those answers would be comprehensive. There's just too many edge cases. It's too complex. You're dealing with a ton of different variables and vectors. So really hard to cover in this amount of time. A lot of people will try to take all of those different vectors and factors and condense it down into 2 or 3 or maybe even 1 metric. And they try to say, this is our metric. And the one that we all like to poke fun at is lines of code. So we say, oh, our metric of good performance is you've got to write 50 lines of code per day. So easy to hit. I can hit it in 10 minutes, including committing and code reviews. We also sometimes like to poke fun at metric of bugs produced. So if you produce code that has no bugs, you're good at performance. Not actually, that just means you're good at hiding your bugs, because you'll always release bugs. You just hope the ones that don't get caught aren't catastrophic. I've got some really bad stories of that from the financial industry. But then you start looking at some of the more esoteric things. Who is there to say that extroverts are better than introverts? Those are both factors of developers. And you can't say that extroverts are better than introverts or the other way around, because extroverts are great for team cohesion. Introverts are great for focus and getting things done. You need both of them. You can't say that one's better than the other. You also can't say that somebody who is very knowledgeable about one language is better than somebody who is average on many languages. Because you can take somebody who's on the committee to decide new features for C++, and they don't understand functional programming like somebody who is average with JavaScript. And there are certain problems that lend themselves to functional programming better. So we can't take all these different factors and condense them down into 1 or 2 or even 10 things. So the way I look at performance management is we're paying people for their capacity or their capability. And then I expect average performance of about 80% of that capacity. So it's easier to decide what somebody's capacity or capability is. I can take a junior developer and say, go and program or reprogram the Unreal graphics engine. It's going to be way over their head. I mean, you've got to have some people who are pretty deep knowledge of vector graphics to be able to do that. And so it's real easy to say that's above their capability. As you start getting closer to the line, it starts getting a little bit harder, but we've all got some kind of sense of where our capability lies. And so then the question is, once I know roughly where somebody's capability is, what is 80% of that? And if we look in an office environment, there are certain indicators that a manager would look at to decide whether somebody is performing or not. And I group them into 4 things. One is busyness. In an office environment, you can see somebody typing, you see whether they're surfing YouTube or going to meetings. You've got some indicator there of what they're doing. You've also got an indicator in their attitude. Somebody walks into work, you can tell that they had a rough morning, commute was awful. You can tell if they're happy, if they're excited. It's just really apparent. There's also reputation. You can see how other people treat that developer. You can also look at the quality of their output. Go do your own code review. go look at how things are coming together and whether there needs to be a lot of rework. So in an office environment, that's fairly standard, fairly well known. You go into a remote environment, the same indicators exist, they're just weaker. The busyness one, I can't see if you're typing on your keyboard. At least I shouldn't be. We shouldn't be putting keyloggers on people's computers. But I shouldn't be able to, I don't see whether you're typing or not. I see whether you're chatting with people. And I can't say, like we were talking about extroverts versus introverts, I can't say everybody needs to be typing 20 messages into Stride or Slack every day, because some people won't. Other people will type 100 because they love the water cooler room. By the way, my favorite that we have is called Small Humans, all about kids. So when you're looking at that indicator of busyness, you're looking for a change out of normal. When you're looking at attitude, that one's a little bit harder because when you're looking just at text, it's hard to get the tone. And so this is one place where the daily Zoom stand-up actually comes into play. And we have, on certain teams that I've been on, we have done a daily Zoom stand-up. It's a pain because you've got to synchronize times, but I get to see everybody's face every day. And so I can use that time to judge how people are doing. Reputation is a little bit easier remote because I'm doing one-on-ones with everybody. I ask how teamwork's working, what are the problems going on. And output quality is just as easy as in the office because it's all in repos. I can go do my own code reviews. So let's say that you've got these indicators, you've noticed some changes, you're wondering if somebody's having some problems. So what do you do then? Very first thing, you assume positive intent. You give them the benefit of the doubt. Is if you have somebody who normally posts 50 messages a day, and all of a sudden they have a day where they post 5, you could say, oh, well, he must be having a bad day. But it might just be that he's focused. There's a deadline coming up, and he's like, man, I've really got to get this done. So he closed Slack and just work. You can't assume that because one of the indicators has changed that there's something bad. It's an indicator to go dig deeper. That's the next thing you do, investigate more. You can't take the signal at face value. You've got to figure out what it's really saying. Look for the story behind it. Related, don't tolerate gossip. Gossip is just a workplace killer because you end up in situations where something bad is said about somebody and they don't have a chance to defend themselves. There is no assume positive intent in gossip. So if you find any gossip, you got to kill it. And also, if you suspect any performance problems, video chat is 1,000,000 times better than text. Go drop a message to the person and say, do you have a minute to chat? Drop a Zoom link in there. Increase that bandwidth from just the words you're typing to the words plus the tone plus the body language. You got to get as much information going as you can. So I want to spend just a couple of minutes now that we've kind of laid a groundwork of how to identify problems. What do you do about them? And in this I would lump performance improvement and performance maintenance together, because the concepts are the same. It's just the intensity that changes between those two. So I kind of break them down into 3 keys. 3 keys of performance improvement. One is aligning true motivation. Now I say true motivation because it's usually pretty easy for people to lie or to cover up, but you need to really try to get down to the bottom of things and figure out what's really going on. But you've got to align motivation. And when I think about motivation, I kind of make a little 3x3 table in my head. And on the bottom level, the bottom row, I put fear. People are motivated by fear. This is typically, I don't want to lose my job, so I'm going to do this thing. The middle row is duty. I do it because I'm getting paid. I do it because I'm told to do it. There's a sense of, I just need to do this. It doesn't matter what my opinion is. And the top one is love. And you do it because that's what you want to do. There's some other motivator besides duty or fear that just makes you want to do that. Then, when you look at the columns, these ones are not, one is better than the other. But most people will fall into one of these three columns. One is praise. Some people are motivated by praise. It's like, I do this thing because people will say, that's awesome. I love that. I think you did a great job. We actually get a lot of applications for this. We were talking about how to get applicants. That's not a problem that Trello has typically because we're a popular product. And so we don't do recruiters. We don't use recruiters. We just have enough people applying that we can pick between people. But we get a lot of people that are motivated by praise. They want to have their name attached to this big fancy product that people know. And that's okay. But it's important that you know that that's what they're motivated by. The next column is winning. There are lots of different ways to determine whether you're winning or not. A lot of this will come down to dollars. But it's not about the dollars. It's about whether your dollars are more than other people's dollars. So people are motivated just by winning. This is why gamification works. People will, I've been using Duolingo lately, and there's all these little gems, and I'm like, I really don't care about the gems. I am not motivated by winning. I just want to learn this language. But there are people that are motivated by, I need to have as many gems as possible. And that's okay. You just need to know that they want to win. And then you can use that. And the other column is right. It is, people will do things because they feel it's right. Because they have decided that this is the thing that I find value in. And so I'm going to do that because it's right. Typically, this happens when people say, I just want to serve customers. So at Trello, we've got a number of different engineering teams. We have, the team I'm mainly responsible for is the enterprise team. We serve customers who have unique situations. Typically, that is, they've got a lot of users and a lot of boards. But it might be other considerations. But we look at users or groups of users who have unique situations. We have another team that's the core team. They focus more on the general user. Developers on the core team and the enterprise team typically don't switch teams because a lot of times that right column is different. They want to serve different customers. So the people on the enterprise team are like, I want to solve things that are hard for this group of people, and I'm going to get a lot of feedback from them. The people on the core team are more, I notice everybody has this problem, and I want to solve it generally. And so people on those two teams don't switch very often. We also have an internal tools team, and they are motivated different. They know all of their customers. Their customers are the sales team, the support team, the ops and finance. And so when they produce something, they're talking directly to their customer. Then they produce it and they deploy it, and the customer may come and say thank you, maybe not, but they know each of their customers individually. And that's a unique position to be in. So there's these different alignments. You need to know what your people are motivated by. I like to group them in those three. There are also 50 million other things that people might be motivated by. Talk to your people and figure out what they're motivated by. Next key, teach people principles and let them succeed. You can't teach somebody something and then keep teaching and keep teaching and keep teaching and keep teaching and never give them a chance to succeed. Teach somebody something until you think that they know it, and then let them do it and expect it of them. I do this with my kids all the time. I tell them, this is how you do this thing. Now I expect you to be able to do it. 9 times out of 10, they can. And when they can't, I watch what they're doing and I see where they're going wrong. And I say, that's what you don't understand. Let me explain this. Teach them a little bit more. Now I expect you to be able to do it. And then they do it. So tell people, this leads right into key number 3, tell people what you value and they will value similar things. Tell people, I want you to be able to do this. I want you to succeed as a remote employee. These are the things that you need to know how to succeed as a remote employee, and then give them the opportunity. Like the panel was saying, sometimes people just will not succeed in that environment, but you have to give them the chance. And when they fail, then you say, I wanted you to succeed, now I want you to succeed somewhere else, in an environment that you will succeed in. One of the things that managers often look at is firing as the end of the line. I don't look at it that way. I look at it as firing is a step to something better. Because I believe that everybody can succeed given the right environment, given the right training. And if I can't give them that training, somebody else can. And so when I have to let somebody go, or when I have to talk about performance with somebody, it's always in the context of, I want you to succeed. I want you to be better. And if I can't do it, then I'm going to encourage you to go find somebody else who can. So performance management is hard. It differs for every single person. And I can give you examples and give you my tips. But it's something that you have to find out between you and your employee. And if you can't get that to work, you've got to find some other way to get that to work. And it's going to be with somebody else. Thank you.
You said something about killing gossip. How exactly do you go about killing gossip?
Killing gossip is fun. The very first thing I do when I find hint of gossip is first you assume positive intent, you give people the benefit of the doubt, go and talk to them and get their side of the story. And then I tell people very clearly, it's very important to be clear, we don't permit gossip here. If you have a problem with somebody else, you keep it between you and that person, or you and your manager, or you and their manager. But you don't go to their teammates, you don't go to other random people in the company. There are proper ways to deal with problems, and telling everybody about somebody else's perceived problem is not the way to do it. And if people don't understand that, then they are in a situation where I cannot teach them that any longer.
Thank you for a great talk. Wanted to have you touch base on executives, like say in a remote company, how do execs, like C-level execs and the next level, manage themselves? Are they also remote, or they do make some rules or guidelines that the core team, which is running the organization, is going to be like, remote or non-remote, and then they have engineering teams spread out?
A lot of places take the stance that management needs to be co-located and individual contributors can be remote. I'm a manager. I've been remote for 4 years as a manager. Before Trello and Atlassian, I was with Fog Creek, which is where Trello came from. I was VP engineering there. So it does work to have upper level management be remote. You just have to be intentional, and you have to understand that some signals are weaker. One of the great points about this that I show people is when I was VP engineering at Fog Creek, we would have meetings where the founders were in a conference room in New York, and then other managers, including myself, were remote. So anyone in the office was in the conference room, everybody else was up on the wall. And we found that the manager or the founders were actually getting quite frustrated with we remote people because we wouldn't speak up. And so we thought it through, and we figured out that there's that 50 millisecond or maybe 80 millisecond delay between when somebody starts speaking in New York and when I in Idaho hear it. And then I start to respond, and that takes another 80 milliseconds to get back to New York, by which time somebody in the conference room has already started talking, and then they feel like they're getting interrupted, and I don't know that they feel like they're getting interrupted for another 80 milliseconds. And so we realized there's this imbalance when some people are in the conference room and some people are remote. And so we made the rule, if anybody's remote, everybody's remote. And our office environment was well suited to that. Fog Creek had the philosophy that all developers get a private office with a door that closes. So that was a pretty easy transition for us. I'm doing a workshop on using Zoom later. I'll talk a little bit about how to do these everybody's remote meetings when you do have people in conference rooms. But yeah, there are imbalances when you have executives or higher level managers remote. So you've got to compensate for that. Your signals are weaker. You just have to be aware of where the weaknesses are and address them as they come.
How you doing? So, if I understood correctly, you kind of expect people on average to perform at 80% of their capacity, which hurts to hear that. But I understand that at scale, that has to become the norm. So, how do you measure somebody growing and getting better at their job? Are they now performing at 85, 90%, or is their capacity now 105, 110% of what it used to be? So, is this scale continues to grow of 80% of their capacity, which continues to get better? How do you measure if somebody's going to become a leader, a manager? How do you measure if somebody's learning something new?
Yeah, the reason I talk about 80% of capacity is for those real slogs where you've got a deadline coming up and you really need to hit that, so people are putting in 80-hour weeks or whatever, and that I view as you're hitting 100% capacity for a long duration. It burns people out. And so I say 80% because I don't want people to burn out. And so I expect 80%. It'll vary around there, but I'm not pushing people to the max all the time. The growth will happen either when people are taught to increase their capacity or they're pushed to increase capacity. And I much prefer the taught aspect of it. When you look at junior developers, because we'll take them as an example because they advance the most in the shortest amount of time. We're not pushing them past 100% all the time. We're teaching them to increase their capacity. And so I look at it as I do want that 80% of capacity all the time, and their capacity increases. So you take we have a junior developer who's been working on a microservice all her own. And so she has to learn, how do you build this microservice? How do you deploy it? How does it fit with all the other components and talk to them? And those are all things that she didn't know before. And so as she learns those, her capacity increases. And I expect that when she goes over to another project that uses microservices, that is already in her wheelhouse. And so 80% of her capacity at that point is a whole lot higher than 80% of her capacity before. Yeah.
Hi, good evening.
Lost it there.
Thank you so much for the insights. My question for you is, does remote work for junior employees, and how can we actually make it work for them?
We have a junior developer program. With the junior developer program, we said specifically we are going to hire career switchers. We're not going to hire people straight out of college. And the reason we said that is because when you hire somebody straight out of college, you have to teach them two things. One, to code, because I'm guessing everybody had a first year kind of like mine. You feel like I learned more this first year of employment than I did the 4 years previous at college. So you've got to teach people to code. You've also got to teach them to be employees, because they've never been in an environment where if I have this kind of a problem, I need to go to this place. If I have this kind of problem, I need to go to this person. And this is where I'm expected to sit. And there are norms around when I'm there and when I'm not. And so there's a lot of teaching people to be employees when they come straight out of college. And then if you throw remote on top of that, then it's a third thing you've got to teach people. So we said, we're capable of teaching people two things. And so we're going to throw out teaching people to be an employee. So on the resume screen, we would look, do you have experience somewhere else where it looks like you've been successful in your career? And if that's the case, and you've done something to show that you're interested in coding and that you have some capability, then we'll interview you. And so typically that meant most of our applications for junior dev that we interviewed came through boot camps. So when you've got the remote aspect, you can make it work. I'm actually hoping to see that junior developer tomorrow, because she works out of the Atlassian office here in San Francisco. Her mentor is not in that office. And so you can make it work. And she has had a great experience with it. We just had a retrospective after 1 year. So it'll work. You just got to make sure that you're not trying to tackle too many things all at once.